What? No small talk? No chit chat? That's the trouble with the world today. No one takes the time to do a really sinister interrogation anymore. It's a lost art. I'm Chris Spivey.
And I'm Eddie Webb.
And today on Journalist, we talk about Goldeneye. Hello, listeners. I'm going to start off the podcast today by saying up front that I am unabashedly a fan of this movie, but I also will admit that when it came out, and it still could be to this day, that I had a man crush on Pierce Brosnan, so that may have altered my opinions of the film, regardless of what I say, into a more positive light.
I will hold off on affirming or denying your validity of your opinion because I want to see where this conversation goes. But good to know up front that you're biased towards this movie.
Yes. So put it out there. I love Remington Steele also as the TV series. It is, in fact, one of the shows that really got me into watching different sort of mystery dramas and everything else. So much so that during the height of COVID, I started rewatching it with my wife, who'd never seen it before. And we got to the middle of season 2 before real life kicked in.
I was about to ask, has it aged well?
Sorta.
That's a good start.
All right. So seriously, if you want to watch Remington Steele, I would suggest watching the first season 1, episodes 1 and 2, and then skipping all the way to season 2, episode 1.
Wow, that bad.
Well, I didn't really intend this to be a talk about Remington Steele.
Of course
Part of the problem with
it is.
Remington Steele is a great premise for a show. In case people don't know what Remington Steele is, Laura Holt. Look at this. I haven't even looked it up or read it. Laura Holt starts her own detective agency, and she's a brilliant, good detective, but no one really wants to hire her or take her seriously because she's a woman. The series starts in 1982, I think is when it was originally made. So she creates a boss for herself, an imaginary boss called Remington Steele, who runs everything, but no one ever gets to meet Remington Steele, but they work through her, and she got more and more business, more and more successful. And she has a team of 2 or 3 other people that work for her, aka Remington Steele. They are in one of their first cases, the first case they're on for the television series. They encounter someone who assumes the identity of Remington Steele. And throughout the course of the show, you find out more about that person. And Pierce Brosnan assumes that role. You think he's a thief, maybe he's a thief or not, but they end up working together. And he learns more and more, and he solves cases. This is a part that could have been really hooked me on Eddie, is when they're going through the mysteries. About halfway through the film, through the episode, he'd go, this is and it reminds him of an old movie, and he lists the actors from the movie and talks about how that movie relates to the case they're on.
Okay,
so
there we go.
I don't know why something that does media like that would jump out at me. But anyway,
nice.
The reason I say start with season 2 is the structure of the show for the first season. I even think it's a shorter season. Doesn't quite work because they have Remington Steele, Laura Holt, Murphy, and an assistant who stays in the office whose name I can't remember. But they essentially have 2 leading men in a show and a leading woman and a sidekick. And so it's sort of a weird love triangle that's not really there because she doesn't have interest in Murphy, who's a friend. So for the start of second season, they cut the 2 extra characters and it focuses more on Holt and Steele.
I see. That makes sense.
And then they bring in some other people eventually, but that dynamic works better and the show really picks up and finds its footing.
Okay. Good to know.
All of this is actually relevant to this because Remington Steele is the reason that Pierce Brosnan was not in the Living Daylights.
Right, because he was filming it during the time.
No, they were done, and his contract was done. And then that's when he essentially got the role to become Bond, and they started doing some soft advertising. And can't remember if it was NBC at the time said, "Hey, there's a 60-day window for your contract, or we could restart your contract. We're not done with you yet, so you're still Remington Steele." And then they went to the Broccoli's and said, Remington Steele could also be James Bond.
I see.
How do you think Albert Broccoli would take that, Eddie?
What I've learned about him through the course of this podcast is not well.
So yeah, and in the end, they restarted the Remington Steel series for season 5. Bond then kind of lost the role, which is why there was enough time for Timothy Dalton to get done. I think with some movie he was recording was with the nanny to then take over the role of Bond. So
Right.
Remington Steel cost Pierce Brosnan the chance to being Bond.
Mm.
In that 5th season, ran maybe 4 episodes before they canceled it.
Right. Because it was very clearly a power play.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to get the trickle-down marketing buzz from a new Bond film.
Correct.
Huh. It's interesting, especially because it's such a long-running series. We're now deep in the part where Bond is just kind of, well, actually, take it back. We just passed the part where Bond was an assumed thing that always happened, and therefore people start to pivot around that assumption. But now we're go back to Doctor Who. Now we have a brief kind of interregnum, right, where the future of the series is a little unclear until Goldeneye. And it's not coming out like clockwork every 2 years and whatnot. So it is interesting, kind of parallel to that, roughly the same time period too, mid-90s.
You put me up for like this. This isn't even in the notes document. This is perfect because we have a notes document that I started to noodle on, and then real work got busy, so I have not gone back and done anything to it. And so Eddie's looking at this sparse sprinkling of notes here that's not really useful. That is definitely not going to have what I'm about to say right now in it. So that 6-year window that happened there,
Mhm.
6-year window, is part of it's dealing with like legal issues and battles with everything else
Mhm.
from some of the different Bond rights. I think one of the companies are going to try to be sold to a different company, which caused more legal issues during that course in time. Broccoli let go a whole bunch of people he previously worked with, like past writers, producers, like, you're out of here, get the road, cutting people left and right.
Right.
I don't know the full scope of it because haven't read up on it. But I do know during that 6-year window is that they originally actually had an idea for the next Bond movie starring Timothy Dalton. There's even, I think, a promotional poster or two floating around somewhere in the world that you can see.
Oh.
And the legal quagmire slowed it down so much so that Dalton's contract had expired. He was supposed to do 3 Bonds movies, but his contract expired.
Mhm.
And then when they came back to him, I want to say this 93-ish, maybe 94, saying, hey, all right, we're ready. We're going to do this thing. And Dalton's like, yes, I'll do one more Bond film. And Broccoli's like, no, you have to do more than that because it's been so long. And Dalton said, no.
While you're talking, because that sparked a vague memory in me, and so I did a quick search, and you're right. They actually had gotten pretty far on what they were tentatively calling Colonel Sun, which would have been Bond versus Soviet China.
Yeah. Yeah. And I vaguely remember some of the plot things too. And I don't think that would have been a good
Or
movie.
Communist China. Yeah, sorry, I said Soviet China's Communist China. But yeah, it would have been.
I know what you meant.
I've read the Colonel Sun book, and it is not good.
I think somewhere in there he fights a security robot. I think is one of the initial
I think
drafts.
maybe, yeah. It
Funnily
also
enough, though,
certainly is it's at that awkward time of where people are starting to recognize that there are other markets and that maybe they shouldn't do vast stereotypes, but the writers of the James Bond books have not adapted to that model yet, so they're still using broad racial stereotypes. So it's a very rough transition to build a movie around that in an area where China was starting to blow out as a potential movie market. Would have been awkward.
yeah. Which I'm fairly. It feels though like they took some of those bits of ideas from that movie and put them into Tomorrow Never Dies.
Which I have not seen actually, but I'm not surprised. Is that the one with the invisible car?
No, I think that's the one after that one. I
Okay.
can't quite remember, but I will tell you Oh, I love Michelle Yao. Sorry if I mispronounced
Yeah.
you. Not gonna watch that movie, even though how much I love her and she's awesome, and she should have had her own spin-off series. Couldn't do it because
I will eventually watch them all, partially because I enjoy Pierce Brosnan, but
Jonathan
I also
Pryce
enjoy Roger
is an
Moore,
evil
and right, we worked through Moonraker, so
Oh, Moonraker is still better than the other movie, hands down. Better Bond movie. I will stand by that. I will die on that grave.
okay, you do that.
All right, you got me rambling now all over the place. Where's I at? I'll pull it back to be more relevant. Part of the issue, though, with having the Bond movie come out after that 6-year gap was that they had to deal with the entire sort of fall of the Soviet Union. Like the
Yep.
entire political climate had changed during that 6-year window, which multiple rewrites. And during the time, they were debating how they wanted to address Bond. I think part of the conversation was they could have had a Bond set in the 60s, kind of going with a retro vibe. They talked about casting a woman in the role of Bond. I want to say, was it Sharon Stone who they were playing around with the idea of taking
Oh
over?
wow.
Or going with a black Bond with like Wesley Snipes. Eddy, I want to see the
Oh
Wesley
my
Snipes
God.
Bond movie.
Seriously, a 90s Wesley Snipes Bond would have been fucking amazing.
Yes, that would have been fucking phenomenal. Instead, they took the easy route, in my opinion, and said, fuck it. We're just going to go totally old school and talk about it like that.
Well, right, and so, but I mean, one thing that I don't think gets talked about a lot when we talk about Goldeneye is it's not a reboot in the sense that Casino Royale down the road will do, right? But it is kind of a reboot in the sense that most every Bond's transition is in some way resetting the franchise. It's what we now call a soft reboot, right? The continuity, what little continuity there is, like his wife is apparently dead the entire time, which they have figured out. But generally speaking, the tone and the vibe shifts, right? So it's the close analogy, which has been made before, is that recasting James Bond is a bit like the Doctor regenerating. It's all kind of in continuity, but the series does kind of change a bit each time. But the impression I got was that because you said it was so long, and they realized for various reasons that they were shooting towards something with the Dalton Bond that didn't quite land. So they went slightly different direction with this, and on top of that, James Bond is a Cold War character. That all changed under them. There was a lot of pressure on this movie to succeed.
Yes.
And while there may have been a Bond movie after this, that was not nearly the guarantee it had been in previous years. And part of it was because Albert Broccoli, I believe, at this point stepped away for his daughter Barbara, right?
Yes. And he actually passes away, I want to say, a couple months after this movie's released.
Mm-hmm.
So it was Barbara Broccoli and someone else whose name I don't remember. Someone who is important in the Bond franchise, but not enough in my brain for just sticking in at like 4 in the morning.
Right. And so this is, I'll let you go through the list of it, but like, there's a lot of firsts happening in this movie. I talked last time, like a lot of the wrap ups for, in the last movie we talked about, a lot of things changed to the point where if you had just said this is a rebooted Bond, you don't have to change a single frame of the movie to just say this is just a new continuity, right?
So I know you keep saying reboot. I don't see it, even from a Saw perspective. And now having watched The Living Daylights, sorry, the fucking horrible License to Kill,
The Living
License to Kill in relation to Goldeneye, it doesn't even feel like a soft reboot. It literally just feels like a different month in Bond's life. And part of that for me is a transition of one of the first for the movie is like having Judi Dench be the first female M, and her being slotted into a new role just seems like they had a change in staffing almost at MI6 is all it is.
So I think the issue we're running into here is that is frankly the fact that it's 1995. Sorry. The idea of rebooting a movie franchise isn't quite done yet. It's going to be very, very close when that is a thing that is viable and people will accept it. So I agree with you in the sense that if you're watching movies back to back, if you didn't realize 6 years had passed, and obviously acknowledging the fact that there's an actor change, which has been a staple of the film franchise, you could say, no, these are all in continuity with each other very, very comfortably. And I would agree with that. But a lot of how the movie is made and a lot of the choices that were made are pretty distinct from, let's just say, both Dalton films and call it there, because we keep doing the Living Daylights. No, wait, License to Kill. There's a pretty strong cut. And we talked before about how sometimes these recastings have a bit of a cheek to them, right? Like, no, this is really James Bond kind of moment. Without going too much into the actual breakdown, one of the pieces of that is that there is a flashback. The movie starts with a flashback, which would be chronologically set right before Dalton's run. So there's a kind of a quiet, yeah, we're just ignoring that bit, right? Which I don't agree with, but the way it's kind of structured, you're right. It's like if people want to watch it and go, "Oh, this is just another month of Bond's life. This is a few years later." You absolutely can, because movies audiences wouldn't have accepted. What do you mean we're starting over? How does that work? 10 years after this, the movie audience is much more acceptable to. Okay, yeah, sure. This is an explicit canonical reboot of the franchise, and that's okay. This is people want this to kind of feel like the Bond movie, and so therefore it has to kind of more or less flow. So chronologically, from a continuity perspective, yes, this is not a reboot. That's why I've been using soft reboot when I can, because it is closer to when the Doctor gets recast. Because my argument is that every time the Doctor gets recast, the show does kind of soft reboot. It is. It's not quite accurate. It's really showrunners and blah 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 blah. But my point still largely stands. Like the show, looking at the Fourth Doctor and then looking at the Fifth Doctor, those are very different shows, even though they're chronologically one after the other. Right.
If you want to discuss it like that, then let's look at the Fourth Doctor, and we can say like the Fourth Doctor's first season of his run compared to like the Fourth Doctor's fourth season of his run are vastly different shows, all within the same Doctor.
But that analogy would be Roger Moore. Roger Moore's first movie and Roger Moore's last movie are very different from each other too, right? So like, I mean, there are analogies to be made here, and and we're not doing this just because we're Doctor Who fans. It's also because we're Doctor Who fans, but also these are two British franchises that have lasted the same length of time. Goldeneye came out within a year or two of Doctor Who. Or sorry, Goldeneye. Doctor No came out within a year or two of Doctor Who. They both had a lull in the middle, although for wildly different reasons. That lull happened to be roughly the same time period. Difference is that James Bond's pulled out of that nosedive, Doctor Who didn't. But they also both explicitly reboot within a year of each other, 2005, 2006. And they're both franchises iconically known for recasting their lead actor. So I mean, there's a lot of analogies to be made that are very clear. So I have that context in my head when I'm saying this is a soft reboot, even a quote unquote reboot. But I think a lot of that, more to your point, is that the world in '89 and the world in '95 are vastly different.
Yes.
So a lot of that is just because James Bond is set in an amalgam of our real world. Not a real world, but like a version of real world where physics just works differently, but it's more or less our real world. When the real world changes that radically, James Bond has changed radically. And if it coincides with a change in production lead and a change of lead actor, it's going to be hard to not see that as some form of reinvention.
Now, you've given me a few different avenues to go down. So first, I want to take a step back and focus on the Doctor Who one. If you listen to us during the Doctor Who run, one of the things I specifically pointed out is, I forgot her name now, but the actress who played Barbara is the reason that Sean Connery was in the right place to become Bond for Dr. No.
Right.
So
Right.
James Bond and Doctor Who are like interwovenly linked in multiple different ways. For instance,
Yep.
the actor, if Pierce Brosnan had turned down the role to not do Bond, I think it was going to actually be Paul McGann who got to be this James Bond.
Oh, that would be so good. And so bad, actually, but also so good.
Because a bunch of people tried out for it. I can't remember if Ray Fiennes tried out for it. I can't remember. I know that originally Sean Bean somewhere along the way tried to audition to become Bond. There are so many different people that are like floating around, and they pulled in, for instance, Sean Bean gets to be the villain of the piece. Ray Fiennes will eventually become M somewhere down the road. Like
Yep.
it is interesting to see all these different avenues Bond could have went and how it relates to Doctor Who. Like just the
Yep.
touchstones of Doctor Who all throughout Bond franchise.
Mhm.
So some of the first for this Bond movie, in addition to things we talked about, is this is the first Bond movie not to use any elements from an Ian Fleming novel. Like none.
Yeah, not even title.
Which is utterly fascinating.
If I remember correctly, Goldeneye was the name of Ian Fleming's home?
Like Writer's Retreat or something like that.
Yeah, right. One of the places he owned. That's
But
the
I think it was
only
also
connection.
I also think it was the name of a World War II operation that he was a part of.
Oh, okay. That actually makes
I'm
sense.
fuzzier on those details, but I want to say that was part of it. I think it was part of the World War II thing, which is why he named the retreat after it, which is then why I think they named the movie after it. And plus,
Right.
Goldeneye sounds cool. I'm not gonna lie.
It does.
Talked about M first time being portrayed by a woman. We briefly touched on this is the first Bond movie after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, ended the Cold War. This is the first Bond movie to use computer generated imagery.
Yeah.
I don't know how I
First
feel
Bond movie
about
CGI. Which 11 years later, they're gonna go, yeah, let's do less of that. So, take that for what you will.
And this is movie also shot in the Levinson Studios, I think, which was sort of an old Rolls Royce factory, because Sean Connery came in with his other movie the first night, and they'd already booked the original studio they wanted to use.
That sounds about right, actually.
It's not that Sean Connery went and booked it, but I like the fact that I can like say it was the Sean Connery movie that stopped this movie from using the studios they wanted to use that made them go do
Right.
something else.
But back to Judi Dench real quick. Is she the actor to play M the longest, just year to year?
I think so.
Because she played M from 1985 to 2021, right? She was in the very last movie, wasn't she? Is in a cameo.
95 to so I have not seen the last Bond movies. I know
Okay.
that she played M from 95 to I want to say was it 2012, which was Skyfall.
Right. Yeah, because spoiler, she dies in Skyfall. But I believe she came back as a cameo in 2021. But even if I'm wrong, that's still damn near 20 years.
And so I don't know. That'd be a good thing to sort of look at and see, considering how many times they sort of rotate people randomly throughout the series for M's and other characters. And for recasting, though, they also cut some of the other Bond people that they brought in. For instance, there is a new Moneypenny in this film who I love. Samantha Bond's awesome. So I am glad that Samantha Bond was a Moneypenny here.
Right. Yeah. I did just look. Bernard Lee, who played him the first run of Fleming or Connery movies, played from 62 to 79. So that would have been 17 years. Judi Dench played from 95 to 2015. There was a movie after Skyfall, but before the one I was thinking of. That was the cameo she had. So she's played for 20 years. So yeah, Judi Dench has actually played longer. And of course, Ralph Fiennes, as you mentioned, is playing him currently.
And part of the impetus, though, it's believed that they, for casting Judi Dench, in addition to her being a phenomenal actress, is that there was a head of MI6 that happened a few years before the movie came out.
Yeah, her character was based off of that character, which digression, but for people who have been watching Slow Horses, the head of MI6 in that show is also based off of that original real world woman who is the head of MI6. So
Which is a better portrayal?
I've not seen the movies or the Soul Horse. I've only read the novels, so I can't tell you which is the better portrayal.
Okay.
But there is certainly, from having read the novels, there is a fair amount of overlap in the, particularly the adjustment of espionage to a more data-driven discipline. Because again, she makes a straight comment in this movie that she comes from statistics or analysis or something, and that was seen as a big controversial thing. But that was basically, again, a real world shift to, with the increase of computers, MI6 started moving towards more data driven analysis, and that's something that thread has carried on into Slow Horses. So like there's a very, they're not, obviously not in continuity with each other, they're completely different shows, but I mean they're drawing from the same trends in real world espionage, which is fascinating. And again, this movie is really exciting because I mentioned before in License to Kill that there were touches of almost deconstruction. We agreed it wasn't actually deconstruction, but it felt a bit like they were looking at the Bond formula and going, hey, let's point out Paris doesn't quite work. Whereas Goldeneye, because the world shifted under them, had to engage with that on some level, in a way that License to Kill was a little reluctant to do. And say, okay, we can't do the exact same James Bond formula anymore because it just simply doesn't work in this world anymore. And so they had a more kind of comprehensive approach to that. But again, it's because the real world was not catching up to those thoughts. It still felt more connected, and M is kind of a good touchstone for that because, like you said, it's based off of how things are actually shifting.
Which could also be one of the reasons why Broccoli let go the original writer that had written so many of the different James Bond movies up to that point, and a lot of the other old James Bond casting to pull in new people.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot his name now, but the director of this is also the same director that kicks off the Daniel Craig's Casino Royale.
I
Martin
can
Campbell.
see notes of that now that you point that out. There's a certain kind of grittiness is not quite the right word I'm thinking of. There's I can't think of it, but like there's reality is not even the right word. There's certainly a sense of not as over the top that some Bond movies can get. That both the Pierce Brosnan run, Daniel Craig run slowly pull up from that base approach. And I could see notes of that in both Goldeneye and my memories of having been a while since I watched Casino Royale. But both of them have certain amounts of, it's not quite reality, but certainly it feels a bit more. I guess Grady is the best word I can think of.
Nice. Do you know some of the people that they talked about being a director for this film?
What was one of them? No, I don't know.
One of the people they approached, which this would have been really weird, is John Landis, who has a whole bunch of controversy around him. John Landis did like the Twilight Zone movie, if I remember correctly, and
Okay.
he did Coming to America as a director.
Oh
But
wow.
there was a whole Twilight Zone helicopter movie, legal battles that people got killed making the Twilight Zone movie that he was directing, and there was an entire legal thing around whether or not he was ordering the helicopter to go down too close to an actor and kids. And
fuck,
I don't remember the full ramifications, but it was ooh. So that would have been meh. I know about some of that just because I was doing some research on Eddie Murphy, and it comes back to Landis's relationship with Eddie Murphy. It's a whole thing. The person I most wanted to touch on was they asked John Woo to direct this film.
Oh, that's
Could have gone one or two ways.
right, exactly. Because like on the one hand, I can absolutely see why someone in 1990, early 90s would have gone, John Woo is hot. John Woo understands action. We should get him to direct a James Bond movie. But on the other hand, there's, as we talked a little bit about this, but like the style of Hong Kong action films and British action films are so wildly different. We talked about this in the Patreon feed a way back. They're so radically opposed that that would have been a much more rebooty vibe, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it would have either been utterly phenomenal or horrible.
Yeah. Um, Although it's funny, it does seem like every time there's been a gap between James Bond films, obviously talk around who's going to be James Bond, but there's also usually a weird directors floated around this regular thing. Because more recently, I think we mentioned this, Amazon now has the rights to the James Bond franchise, and they have to basically quickly put a movie out because James Bond is about to go into public domain soon. But they have settled on a director, but for a while they were floating some weird names around, and one of those was Edgar Wright.
I could see that movie.
It would be a very different James Bond movie, and apparently he was going to pitch. To your point, how these things go in cycles, he was pitching a go back to the '60s style reboot of James Bond. Actually,
Uh, I'd be. I don't want to see going back to the '60s for a James Bond movie, because part of me would then think that they're doing that to try to actively avoid changing Bond, either from like a racial perspective or potentially like gender somewhat perspective. And if they go back to the '60s, they think they'd be safer just to keep casting as a constant white male for like another 50 years.
right? Because the alternative would have been to address the inequities of the '60s to such a level that would stop feeling like a James Bond film.
Correct.
So
And
yeah, I'm with you on that.
one of the big things that we push for, though, you know, we're not going to do it. It's not the film to talk about it, because this James Bond movie doesn't go into that or approach that. This James Bond movie, in fact, says like, we will acknowledge that James Bond is a sexist, misogynist person that's out of place in time, and then focus on him trying to figure out what the fuck he's going to do.
Yeah, it's wild because the discourse around this era of movies is very much that Dalton is the dour, serious one that tries to handle sexism, and then Pierce Brosnan is the lighthearted, fun James Bond that kind of just doesn't deal with it. And it's like, but as we're looking at these movies right next to each other, they're both dealing with the exact same issues, just in slightly different ways. And in fact, I would argue Goldeneye is a much more damning critique of the sexism of James Bond than License to Kill tried to be.
And on that note, if there's nothing else, we can move into the movie, because that's
Yeah.
a good segue for it.
Yep, let's do it.
My only other piece before I do it is I am going to say Pierce Brosnan would have killed in the living daylights now that I've watched Goldeneye. I thought before he did it,
Yeah,
he would have made that movie work.
I
He would not have made License to Kill work, though. God. The opening gun barrel sequence is just matter of fact. It's very efficient compared to the other ones that we've seen. In 1986, I think, MI6 agents James Bond and Alec infiltrate a Soviet chemical weapons facility after Alec is caught and seemingly killed by the facility's commanding officer.
Colonel Arkady Grigorovich Umurov.
The Colonel. Bond destroys the site and escapes in a stolen aircraft.
Right. So there's a lot of Russian names in this movie. So
I could butcher the names with my Alabama. And in case people are curious, I did in fact watch Goldeneye twice because I like the movie that much. But my brain doesn't necessarily process all of the names in a timely fashion for all of you. I can write them. I just can't necessarily pronounce them properly.
Right. Yes, similarly. And like again, because there's we have Alex Trevelyan, we have Arkady Grigorovich Rumorov. There's a lot of fast Russian names thrown around. But there's one thing that's interesting about this movie specifically is that it was a strong choice to go, okay, James Bond's in a post-Cold War era, the Soviet Union's collapsed. Let's actually really focus on a lot of Russian characters in that movie, because it would have been very easy to go, okay, let's just point him at China. Let's point him at another. It's actually one of the few movies doesn't have an eccentric rich person at the head of it, which again is a very strong James Bond franchise. Well, okay, not in the same way.
Okay, there we can agree there.
Not in the same Goldfinger style thing that we've seen a lot of in the past few movies.
Yeah, I will agree to that much.
Right.
Okay, the opening scene of him diving down the cliff face, and a very obvious this is not Pierce Brosnan stunt double scene,
Yeah.
is phenomenal. Although how much they linger on the not Pierce Brosnan guy is a little weird for me. As I was sitting here, I was watching it. That's obviously not Pierce Brosnan. Why are you lingering that much? That seems weird.
Right. Because we've seen this before. Well, I think you've seen it before in Living Daylights, I should say, where they try to do the shtick of like, we're going to spend a lot of time cutting around Bond so you don't know who the actor is for a while. Um, but you're right. As a result, there are certain action scenes in this infiltration that he has to be present for. So they have to focus on the person who's clearly not Brosnan to set up this thing of it actually is Brosnan. It's a weird. I see what they're going for, but you're right. It was not quite shot well.
And okay, if you stop and think about how all the other Bonds have been introduced to us up to this point in time, like
Mm,
Sean Connery is playing Baccarat at the table, looking super cool and swanky. I don't even remember how Roger Moore's introduced, but it's better than how Brosnan's going to be introduced.
right.
Lazenby was introduced. I don't. Oh, can't remember Lazenby either because I didn't watch that one. But Dalton's introduced on a cool action scene of like jumping around on like trucks and everything else, doing cool stuff. Brosnan is introduced upside down like Spider-Man in a toilet, Eddie. Like
Right.
that is a bold choice to make.
And yet I like it, um, because it establishes 2 things simultaneously. One is that this is gonna be, let's go with harder edged bonds because Gritty was I was struggling with harder edged bonds in the style that Dalton was trying to go for, which is that this is a guy who's gonna do infiltration missions and black ops stuff. But also when he goes oh, sorry, this I didn't realize it was occupied, shows that the humor is very explicitly back in a way that Dalton was reluctant to engage with, right?
Yes. And he didn't just throw out the line like didn't spit it out. He
Yeah.
quipped it.
Yeah,
Very
no,
Spider-Man
there was
like.
there was a twinkle and a smile in that line. It's like, okay, immediately you know this is how we're playing this now, and it's a different tone, but it doesn't feel a million miles away from what Dalton was doing either.
No. That's why I keep thinking that Brosnan in the Dalton role for Living Daylights would have made that movie work, which would have been like a Brosnaissance.
Right, but to your point, yeah, I mean, License to Kill was a movie that's much clearly written around where Dalton was trying to go with it, and it would have been super weird to see Pierce Brosnan in Miami Vice the movie. Yeah, I'm with you.
Which then makes me think they would potentially have rewritten that movie to be something else for
Right.
whatever was potentially hot. Like, for instance, even if we look at this movie is going to be influenced by Die Hard,
That's
which is
true. Yeah.
fascinating to think about because we talked about how Bond sort of follows whatever tropes have been popular a few years before, and it would have been Die Hard and some other action movies around this time.
Right. Now, I had a vague theory starting out. It's not going to pan out. But um, 006, let's say to make it clear, um, 006 seems to, at least in the first part of this movie, be written in the Dalton mode, right? So I was like, are they trying to contrast Alec and James Bond as Dalton and Brosnan, right? Here's the dour James Bond you saw before. We'll cast him as 006 and write this as if we were writing Dalton. Um, it's not quite true, but this first part of the movie, you can see a bit more of the contrast of styles, right? Because 006 is very efficient.
So originally, the 006 role was supposed to have been a mentor to Bond, and they were trying to get Anthony Hopkins or, funnily enough, I mentioned Die Hard. I think Alan Rickman to play that role.
Oh, that would be
And
so weird.
when they couldn't get them, they rewrote the role to be a peer instead of like a mentor figure.
I think that's a way better decision, honestly.
Yeah, so it can be actually in the field with him, and you would have someone who is equal to Bond, and so you'd have that great parallel.
Right, because and honestly, again, like if it had been a mentor thing, that would give you more ammunition to my it's a reboot phase because like, why is his mentor not showing up for almost 20 movies, right?
Yeah, So I don't know everything else about it, but that was supposed to have been like part of it, and that didn't work because they said no. But Anthony Hopkins in a Bond film would have been
I
fascinating.
mean, yes, but not as another agent. That would have been as a retired field agent, sure, but not as an active field agent. That would have been super weird.
While not a mentor, him as a field agent is really cool. Now I mentioned it because it makes him a parallel to Bond, but we also get to see how cold he is because he randomly shoots a scientist in it. He pauses. 006 leads in and goes, you know what? You're dead. And shoots a random scientist in a totally another room. They could have snuck past how 007 did.
Right, and it's one of the things I like about Goldeneye is that by having 006, it finally gives them a chance to distinguish how James Bond is different, right? Um, and especially when you have recast the first actor or recast the lead actor, it's a good moment to kind of say, let's reestablish personality. Again, it's something that I think the Dalton era struggled with because they need to do that, but they didn't have a way to kind of get forward. By doing this, turns out maybe they've stumbled into the solution. But now it's the okay, so Alec can be the cold-hearted bastard, and so Bond looks more human compared to him. And so we're already starting from a sense of Bond is more than just a blunt instrument. And so we can then build on that going forward from this movie. And by the end of the movie, we'll have Bond in a new place that we can then go from there. So yeah, no, this was extremely well done. I know you're a big fan of the James Bond, so it's a completely unrelated case, vote, but I think this flashback actually does a really good job setting up this whole movie.
It does. And because there is that 9-year jump, it becomes a totally separate case. Because
Hmm.
then, all
Yeah,
right,
true.
I
Yeah,
know
yeah. Good point.
how because I look at it as if they were essentially they're all the same actors. How we're supposed to look at it, like it's all the same character regardless who plays it. So by jumping ahead 9 years, we would have had this mission that he went on with his partner, who the partner, to the best of your knowledge, gets killed. And then we go into Living Daylights and License to Kill, and then this case comes back around. So it
I'm just
has that.
imagining. I'm just imagining a watch order where, like, you watch the first part of this movie, stop, watch both Dalton films, then come back to the Golden Eye.
Well, wait, is it even both Dalton films?
Because the first one's in when it is Living Daylights. When was it released? We'll assume that was the year it was set in.
Now I don't remember off the top of my head, and I've taken it off of this note sheet. So this is me actually looking something up for the first time in live air.
Fair enough. Because
Living
like
Daylights is
because
87.
that's what I thought, right? Because I thought it was like around 86, 87, because License to Kill's 89. And so if this is your estimated
Yeah,
86, it would predate both
it
Dalton films.
it would just barely. Because I was thinking, ooh, what if it was like this, then a more film, then the Dalton era? It's like, oh my god, that'd be like,
No, but like it's funny. Actually, now that we're having this discussion, I'm actually walking back my reboot argument because now with that, I could see this mission happens. Bond gets betrayed. Bond feels like his best friend died, so it becomes darker and grittier. He gets rid of the humor for 2 missions, goes on another revenge mission, finally realizes revenge is not going to help him stay healthy, takes a bit of a break, does some other missions, and slowly builds himself back up to where he is in actual, after this section of Goldeneye. So there actually weirdly is now a character arc.
there is. Because we look at it, his friend dies, and he's colder in Living Daylights.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's still humorous a little bit. And then we go to License to Kill, where his other friend effectively almost gets murdered. And then he
Uh-huh.
goes full on rage.
Right.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And then you have 6 years of him. Let's assume he gets therapy, and then now he's back to a status quo that we recognize in this movie.
Yeah, I like that. Look at that. There we go. If whenever the Broccoli's want to send, not even the Broccoli's, whenever Amazon wants to send us our checks, we're here to write the next Bond script.
uh,
Just saying, a Spivey and Webb joint Bond, it'd be great.
right.
All right, so we got to move ahead. Another aerial stunt. Seems like every Bond movie now has to have an aerial stunt. What did you think of this one, Eddie? where he jumps after the plane and reaches the plane, putting aside cut scenes and everything else. Like, that's not Pierce Brosnan. That's not Pierce Brosnan.
Right. It's not bad. Uh, Man, I hate to say this, but like the Roger Moore aerial stunts were more interesting. um, but no, you're right. It's the this is the obligatory aerial stunt. Although I just realized, was there an underwater scene in this movie? I don't think there was. Was there?
I think
We'll
he
see. I
was.
guess we'll see when we get through.
They were near the water because that's where the big
Right,
dish comes from.
but didn't actually have an underwater infiltration and or fight, which we've seen in every other Bond movie prior to this.
He did not dress up in a manta ray costume to swim under
And
anything.
frankly, he
Now,
should. He should. He should do that more often. Really, just the whole mission dressed as a manta ray. That'd be great.
all
But
right.
no,
Then I'll see if you have nothing else to say about that
no, no.
aerial scene. Then we get
Actually,
the theme song. Yeah,
actually, real quick, unrelated to what you just said, but I forgot to mention this at the top. Very briefly about the video game, because one of the things that we kind of glossed over was that this movie was extremely successful, and led to a renaissance of the James Bond franchise in the '90s. And part of that was the video game, weirdly, because it came out 2 years after this movie. And the Goldeneye 64 is now hailed as one of the best video games of all time, and by default, the best movie tie-in video game of all time. But part of the reason was because the developers had unprecedented access to the actual sets. And this was one of the sets that they toured, was this infiltration set. And so the intro to the game is very, within limitations of 64 Nintendo 64 technology, is very similar to the movie, because they were able to actually take pictures of the set from all sorts of different angles. They were able to get copies of the posters, all 9 yards. So one of the reasons why that intro is so memorable to a lot of people is because it is so close to the movie, because they were able to do things that most people making tie-in games could not possibly do.
that's awesome. As I've never played the video game, I can't speak to it. Would you like to take a couple minutes to say anything else about the game?
Just to note that the main reason why people remember the game is because of the multiplayer mode. You do things like you could play Odd Job and all sorts of characters from the franchise. And that mode was added literally at the last minute. It was a mode they had hacked in just to test out some mechanics, and then they started having fun playing it at the office. And at the last minute, they said, "We'll just add this, and if people want to play it, it's cool there." And it became the mode that the game is most known for. Most people don't even remember the first player, single player mission version. Um, so hilariously, the thing that it is best known for was like there's a gun in there called the Klob gun. It's specifically a garbage gun. It is a bad gun. It's way too loud. It does very little damage. There's no reason why you should have this gun, but people love it because it becomes a handicap. People who are very good at the game can then say, "Okay, you have to have a club gun," so that way, balance out everybody else. They put it in as a joke. They put it in, and the joke itself is a reference to Kleb. It's supposed to be
Yeah, but
it's supposed to be a intentional misspelling of Kleb because you can get the rights for that. Um, and it became this well-known part of the game. So a bit like this movie, the video game itself also was like never expected to go anywhere, not expected to be much of anything. But the people involved with it had a very strong vision and managed to put something together that has stood the test of time. I don't know if Goldeneye, the movies, stands test of time per se, but certainly they both sides reinvigorated the franchise as a result. So anyway,
awesome.
that's my video game note.
And to your point, though, this was the fourth highest grossing film, I think, in 1995. It
Mhm.
is also was the highest grossing James Bond film, like surpassing Moonraker, by the way,
Yeah.
which was the
Yep.
highest grossing James Bond movie to get up there, counting for inflation and everything. This movie, because that's how awesome
Right.
it
Yeah.
is.
Compared to '89, where it was buried under a lot of other similar blockbusters, this movie actually was ahead of, well, not ahead of the pack, but very close.
Yeah, fantastic. And as I'm about to transition to the theme song, this was not their first choice, I think, for the theme song. They originally had approached, was it ABBA, I think, to do the theme song.
Wow.
And ABBA's, wait for it, ABBA's like production company said, you don't want to do a James Bond film because it's going to hurt your reputation and potential sales. And ABBA said, nope.
Well, in after the Dalton movies, that was probably a very real concern.
So instead, they got Bono and the Edge to write the song, and Tina Turner is singing it.
And Tina's bringing a lot of Shirley Bassey energy to the song too.
Come on. Your name of your movie is Goldeneye. And
Right.
still, the best Bond movie in the franchise to date is going to be Goldfinger. You're
Right.
gonna want to like go back to Goldfinger. We've mentioned it previously. Like everything is in a conversation with Goldfinger going forward,
Yep.
and this movie is very much shaking hands with Goldfinger.
Hmm. Yeah, because again, like if you're going, hey, we need to reinvigorate this franchise, let's go back and homage the most popular one. Right. Totally. So yeah, I stand by it. Every movie has been in discussion with Goldfinger because License to Kill was kind of how can we not be Goldfinger? Answer is you can't quite do that. So here's okay, let's how do we do Goldfinger, but in a different way.
And the song itself is good. It's not great. It has a lot
No.
of build up, but it doesn't ever seem to like get that explosive moment at the end. It's like searching for it. It's like Batman who can't get rid of the bomb. It just can't quite find that final footing to go with.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because like it really comes down to the point where like when she's just singing the word Goldeneye over and over and over again, it's like it feels like the song has run out of stuff to say. It's like I don't know, just say Goldeneye a lot, you know. It's like okay, yeah, it's not, it's a bit unbaked as a song.
Yeah, and well, part of it they're probably trying to go for the Goldfinger bit that Shirley Bassey
Right,
did,
right, totally.
or they're going back for God Thunderball. God, I forgot his name now. Tom Jones's
Tom Jones,
Thunderball.
Thunderball, yeah, yeah, I was actually thinking that too. That's another possibility. But
How did you
yeah,
like the actual graphics for the opening piece?
um, it was okay. Uh, we have reached the weird points of history where James Bond movies are being censored to try to hit the now existent 12 certificate or PG-13 rating, but yet nude women in the Bond opening is still somehow okay.
Because
So
you
it's kind of
can't
the
see
weird,
nips, Eddie. You
right?
can't
But
see
it's
nips.
you could in License to Kill, but you can't hear, but they're still very clearly nude. So like it's
Well,
this weird moment of time.
that was part of the actual discussion for License to Kill is that people were saying your movie's too gritty, so my kids can't see it. And I think in an interview, Dalton was like, "Well, your kid should be able to see Bond movies." So that is potentially why they also have the full nips in License to Kill versus here.
Right, right. Yes, because now we're in a point where it's like, they're clearly it's definitely not a kids movie, but like they're trying to get that teenagers are okay to come see this. Which the more you think about that, the more disturbing that is. But that's what they're
Never
going
know.
for right now, 95.
9 years later, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Bond attempts to prevent Onatop, a member of the Janus crime syndicate, from stealing a Eurocopter Tiger attack helicopter during a military demonstration in Monte Carlo, but is unsuccessful and she flees to Russia. We get a shot of the 1990s hacker, Nightcrawler, who's invincible. Onatop gets off killing everyone, well, nearly everyone, at the science station before the general and she initiate Goldeneye. Whole bunch of
Eh,
stuff right there.
before you start, is that actor actually the guy who played Nightcrawler in the X-Men movies?
Yeah, that's Alan Cummings.
Oh my god, I had no idea.
What?
I
Come
had no
on.
clue.
Come on, Eddie. How-
As soon as you said that, I was like, "Wait," and then the accent clicked into place. Oh my god, that is in fact the same guy because he is playing the accent exactly the same way. Oh, Jesus. Wow. No clue. I'm
so
bad at these
this movie,
things, by the way. Just whenever someone's like, "Where do I know that guy?" Because that happens. I'll watch something, my wife will go, "Who that person from?" I'm like, "I don't know." It's like IMDb has so many hits because it's like, where do I know this person from? Because I'm so bad. It's like I know that person. We're both like, I know that person, but I don't know from where. And then it's like, it's from other thing. So I'm very bad at that particular game.
I've always been an Alan Cummings fan. He's exceptional in everything.
Again, he is him. Honestly, the hacker Boris is that little smidge of Roger Moore era over the top that this movie needed, right? Because he is 1000% I am the Russian hacker. Like, what is Russian hacker archetype? Boom, that's him, Boris. Exactly on screen. Exactly what you expect.
Well, the movie, I think the movie works. This is me a minor spoiler because Boris and Anatop get to be super over the top
Yeah,
because Bond, Natalia are understating like parts of their role. So that's why
yeah,
that works so well, that dynamic plays. Even Sean Bean is sort of understating his role, and every so often he goes a little up, then pulls it right back down.
right, right. Yeah, and that's actually a good point. Because we're seeing here like um there are ranges of performance, and what actually is happening is like we see Brosnan when Bond is with Trevelyan 006, he's pulling his performance down a bit to kind of match his energy of Sean Bean. And then when he's going after on top, he's pushing it back up. And so we're seeing the flexibility of Brosnan's ability to kind of keep in a zone, but there's a pretty wide range of performance that Bond can do. And so he's like, okay, here I'll be a little more Roger Moore, here I'll be a little more Sean Connery, here I'll be a little more Dalton. And so he's pulling the performance slightly different directions depending on who he's with, which is fantastic because it never feels forced. It never feels jarring. It's just he's very organically pulling himself into that, which is also impressive when you realize most of the movie had to have been shot out of order. So that had been a conscious choice by Brosnan to go, okay, here I'm going to pitch it to this. Here I'm going to pitch it down to here. And it's so good.
All right. When we get to 9 years later bit, when he's riding around the car with who we will find out later is the person sent to assess him, it is fantastic. I love it. On the top of that car in the racing, and they make the woman in the car ask what's he makes a comment about like the next girl, and he quips back about
Yes.
her. That's what he's doing while he's with her, and then still his magic penis keeps his job. Eddie, it is
I like the speed as much as the next girl. Who's that? The next girl is perfect. Perfect Bond.
that is the utter perfect balance of Bond on
Yes.
screen. It is sexist, but it's not too over the top with it.
Right.
And it's the fact that Brosnan has the charisma to pull it off. Dalton
Yes.
could not have pulled that off.
Right. Because you're right. I mean, you had, with the exception of the reference to the 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 Bond's implying a threesome with his best friend's wife. We didn't really touch on the magical penis at all during Dalton, and that's very intentional, I think, on your part. You didn't really go into that, but here, yes, no, it is front and center. Like there is no way you can not only sexually harass your instructor who's there to try to see if you're a person that's going to be a danger to other people, but then also doing it and getting away with it while you're also explicitly flirting with someone who is literally just met on the road
Yes.
is
And
peak. This man has 20 charisma in his stats, you know.
and I don't want to bash Dalton because Dalton is an exceptional actor who did great
Yeah,
for what he was trying to do. And I'm going to point out that Moore could not have done what Brosnan did there. Moore's would have been super over the top campy, and then she would have
yeah,
did it anyway.
right,
Connery and Brosnan, I think, are the only two actors that have played James Bond that could have pulled that off. That's even counting Craig.
right, right. But I mean, so again, like what's kind of happening here, setbacks? Because I don't, again, I agree with you. I don't want to bash Dalton. I actually enjoyed watching both Dalton films. Um, but again, that was an era where it's like we have to address the sexism of the character, so we're going to do that by pulling back from that. I joke. I mean, it's consent jokes, but that was a very clear direction with what they were going with Bonds. They're not going this way with here. So what they're doing with Brosnan, you're right, is like going. He's absolutely sexist. He's unrepentantly sexist in this scene. Like this scene is like no, he's a womanizer. There's no way around that. But to your point, you believe it because it's specifically the actor playing it. You don't forgive him. He still is a sexist pig,
Yeah.
but you willing to follow and see what happens next. He's not slimy about it. He's not creepy about it. And I mean, to a certain karmic level, the woman he then flirts with tries to kill him. So it's like, okay, it's a bit of karmic revenge here, and that's a trend you'll see throughout this movie of like Bond is a sexist pig, and then most of the time it kind of backfires on him a little bit, not in a huge way, but in a tiny way. Well, okay, getting your torso crush is perhaps a rather large way of having it fly back. But you get what I'm saying, right? It's
So
like Bond does reap what he sows more in this movie than he does in previous movies.
that's because this movie, I believe, made a role playing character sheet of Bond, and they used the old school system. They use merits and flaws, and they
Yep.
put Bond sexism flaws and put like a big 5 point beside it, like encircled it.
Right.
So deadly flaw is what that is, and everything.
Right.
Um,
Because so what's happened is now sexism is not no longer a a movie trope. It's not a thing that Bond just does. It is you're right. It's an Alex explicitly the movie's like, no, this is a flaw. This is a problem for Bond. Something that Dalton never quite did. They tried to erase it. And that wasn't the answer. The answer is no, just have him keep being that way. But now the world reacts differently because we are in the 90s now and people don't work that way anymore.
yep. Well, I don't know if they ever worked that way, but
But you know what I'm saying?
society
Movie
made it easier for white men to do that.
Okay, valid pushback. And there's another really big pushback on Bond sexism we'll get to in a minute. But like here, it's the yes, Bond gets away with it, quote unquote, but then karmically doesn't actually get away with it.
Yeah. Um. So Eddie, I've talked about my man crush on Pierce Brosnan. I will also mention that I had a minor man crush on Alan Cummings because Alan Cummings is great. But do you know that I actually went out with a girl just like on a top?
Really?
Yeah, for like 2 months too. It's a bunch of stories I will not tell on air recording. Very similar, very same, very dynamic vibe. That's very, very, very similar to that.
Right. And
But I'm
it's
still alive, so less deadly.
well, sure. Um, but going back to the in conversation with Goldfinger thing, right? Like there's more than a little pussy galore in Amatapa, right?
Ah, I think they were going for I think it was a villainess from the Moore era films. I can't remember her name now. But I think there's a little bit of like
I mean, a
maybe
little
a
bit of Octopussy
smidge of
too.
pussy, but I think there's from a different villainess. I can't remember the name though, because I didn't
Right, I
rewatch the
was
movie
more
this
just
time
more
around.
thinking of like a woman who is um obviously a pilot primarily, who is very aggressive and very open in her sexuality. It's just differences as opposed to being coded lesbian on top as coded dominatrix. But I mean, still, there's still to me at least a lot of the fair amount of that vibe. But you're right. I do now vaguely recall there's a late era more Bond
Yeah.
girl that has a similar kind of dominatrix vibe that I'm blanking on at the moment.
And
Was it
I
Fortune?
love
No.
I don't remember enough. I do love the fact though that she is the primary physical antagonist for this film. I fucking love it.
Yeah,
And
she's the powerhouse henchman archetype.
I rank her in my with my henchmen's very close to Oddjob is how much I love her doing this role. It's just
Ah,
not
that's
because
interesting.
Famke Jenkins is gorgeous.
Oh, she
It's
is.
because of the amount of over the top she brings to that role that makes her feel intimidating, regardless of her actual physical stature. And then how she's just like utterly efficient. Like Oddjob brought a different level of menace and was utterly efficient. She brings a enthusiastic efficiency in to death.
Right. So like, and before we watched this movie, I was like, I vaguely remembered on the top, and I'm like, this is that the woman who like fucks people to death? How does that can't have aged well, right? So when I rewatched it, I was like, oh no, she did exactly right because it's the if your whole shtick is I'm going to kill you and make it very much seem like I'm orgasming while I'm killing you. There are two ways to play that, which is understated, which makes it creepy in a certain way that's going to age badly.
Yeah.
She goes after that, which is like going, no, I have to do full like when Harry met Sally in the restaurant
Yep.
orgasm. Just there's no woman who reacts that way unless they are being filmed doing it, and so it's like it's so and so it's sexy, but it's also like this is ridiculous. She's like this is performative, and therefore it works.
So I've said Bond has a magic penis. She has Vorpal thighs.
Right,
I love it so much. Um, a space weapon. You gotta have a
space weapon,
space weapon.
space
I,
weapon.
I love a space weapon.
I love a good space weapon.
I do. And plus, it's the 90s, so that you gotta stick with space weapons. But still, brilliant. Hands down. Love it.
And also, we're yes, so we're at the point where they're actually doing the hacking in Russia part, right? Um,
Yeah.
the pure I think the reason why Space One works is because it's still over the top, but it's no longer the '70s, "Let's go over the top with NASA." Now it's the '90s, "Go over the top with computers," because computers are the big modern science thing that we want to show are cool. And so when I saw them hacking, I immediately got the flashback of, "Oh, fuck, this is Send Spike, isn't it?" And then she goes, "Send Spike." And I'm like, "Oh god, yes, the most nonsense computer thing I've ever heard." And I was like, "It's from this movie." I always say that every time we do Shadowrun or Cyberpunk Red, whenever, someone does a really good computer roll, it's like, "Send Spike." And it's like, I always, do that gag, and it's like, I forgot it was from Goldeneye. That's where I got that from because it's so nonsense. Even to the point where, like, the goofy little icons, which look like someone's GeoCities page. I mean, it's so perfect.
And the reason all of that works so well is that while it is ridiculous, it is also gritty and grounded. Because if they were had to go into space, do something in space, that would have been too over the top. Wouldn't have worked. But here, it's just enough that you can believe it.
Right.
Even like the attack copter that comes in.
Oh, yeah, which is, like, straight up, like, Airwolf, you know? And now that I said that, the theme song's playing in your head.
Eddie, what's Airwolf?
Airwolf is a show. I don't remember how long it ran, but it was in the late 80s, early 90s about an attack helicopter. And it is mostly known for its theme song, which is extremely repetitive and yet somehow super catchy.
I think that one ran for 3 seasons, but I also think then there was a show
Probably.
called Blue Thunder that ran for a
Oh, I forgot about Blue
season.
Thunder. Yeah, there was a weird point in our history, in our media history, where attack helicopters were super popular.
And they got seasons of shows. I don't know how you get seasons of
Yeah.
shows. Where
So I
it
assumed
made
this was a kind of nod towards that Airwolf, Blue Thunder era, which I only vaguely remembered.
returning to MI6 headquarters in London. Bond flirts with Moneypenny, who drops some sig burns on Bond. Then we get Christopher Foyle, Christopher motherfucking Foyle from Foyle's War that I've talked about multiple times on this podcast. This is a young version of
Uh,
him in this movie. Gives Bond the rundown about finding the tiger and insults M, who then shows up suddenly behind him in a usual cutscene that makes him pee his pants, and he gets in line. Continuing the briefing, MI6 staff is monitoring the incident in Siberia. An electromagnetic pulse suddenly hit the site, destroying it and a Russian fighter aircraft. While knocking out some of the satellite systems in orbit, the newly appointed M assigns Bond to investigate after it is determined that the blast came from a Soviet era satellite armed with a nuclear electromagnetic pulse space based weapon, codename Goldeneye. Although Janice is suspected of initiating the attack, Bond suspects that the Armorvorn, not pronounced correctly, now general, was involved because the weapon system requires high level military access.
right.
I'm never going to get that name.
Yes, the general from now on. We know he's general now. Um, so yeah, M. This is where they finally figure out the formula of how to deal with Bond's sexism is by giving him a woman who's a boss. And if this had been the only movie with Judi Dench, there might be more problems here. But
Yeah.
knowing that her entire oeuvre as M, this being the start of their working relationship, it works fine. Because we know from future movies that she's extremely hard on Bond and does not put up with this bullshit. We see a bit of that here, but not nearly as much as we see in later movies.
Well,
Um,
this has a different relationship than that one does. Like this feels
right.
more like boss to worker versus the Bond era, and since the Craig era, that feels like parent to wayward child.
Well, I mean, yes, part of the problem is that Judi Dench gets a reboot, and so we have the awkward moment of at this stage, Bond is the experienced hand and M is the newbie, and then the Daniel Craig era that flips over. M is the established has been the M for a very long time, and Bond is a new recruit. Spoilers. So that dynamic just shift, but still, I mean, um, some of her better. I think it's coming out to more some of her better lines come from Daniel Craig era, but the dynamic is frankly moment one present here. Like the whole what she's trying to do with the role isn't a million miles from this very first scene. It's the I am hard. I am coming from a different place than you in terms of what the world needs, and so we are going to be in odds. But she does. We'll talk about it later. She does bend a little bit, but right now she's not right. And she's like, "Asshole, you're a sexist dinosaur. I don't like you, but you're the best person to get this job done. So follow the fucking mission." And Bond is like, yep, okay, sure, right, you're the boss."
And that was a great bit to see because when they go into her office, she asks if he wants a drink. He says, "Yes, your predecessor kept like cognac," and she's like, "No, I drink bourbon.
Yeah,
That's what we're having." Boom, best dim ever,
yeah,
just
yeah.
from whiskey choice alone.
You're a bourbon fan, so we definitely recognize that.
And it was also interesting because when they do the breakdown, she breaks all that down, and then as he's leaving, she stops and pauses and lets him know that she cares if he lives or dies, but it's not overly too much in either direction. So that's inferring a strict leader, but someone who cares about the people that's going to work for her, which is a very hard balance to strike. Coupled with the fact that if you think about it from the 90s perspective, even now, the amount of pressure that would have been on him in that position.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why I like this dynamic better because previous M's either are ridiculously too hard expectations on Bond, or let him do whatever the hell he wants. And there's very little, and sometimes he flips between those in the same movie, right? Um, Certainly License to Kill, it's like within the same scene, he's like, I have to be strict with you, but also secretly go ahead, please go over here so you can murder this guy. I mean, so like it's the so what did Bond actually lose in this dynamic? Because he still kills people and he still has a job now. So clearly losing his license to kill didn't do fucking all. But this time you feel like if Bond steps out of line, there may actually be consequences.
Yes. So it was nice.
Yeah.
Anything else before we move on?
I see that we have enhancing photographs again.
Thank you. So in the note sheet, I have one word, bold, like just big capital letters, enhance. We have a scene of Bond spotting the only survivor of the crash site on that in their little grainy film footage of her running around. How does Bond do that? Does he have like Blade Runner eyes? Is he Harrison Ford? Or is he Ryan Gosling? Which one?
Right.
I would have to say Ryan Gosling because he didn't say enhance. Anything else before we really move on?
No, it's just the. Remember when I was like, "Oh wow, James Bond's investigation now"? No, we're back to just James Bond regurgitates plot points again. But that's fine. It's a James Bond film.
Well, part of it is if you really think about this plot, it's relatively straightforward. Which
Yes.
part of it is it needs to be to do everything they're doing, and they're counting more on the actors bringing it, which they do.
Right. So, as much as I've given a little stick to License to Kill, License to Kill is Bond being proactive. He has to be by the nature of how that movie works. He has to go out and find people and deal with them because he's not been given a mission. This one movie, he's definitely falling into the plot traps as he walks across them. But that's again most of the Bond films are structured like that. So you can't really ding this movie bad because that is how Bond films are generally made. License to Kill is the exception to the rule, not the rule. So of course Bond's gonna spot the thing that the game master gave him the clue to regurgitate because we needed to get the plot to go forward because that's how Bond movies work. We need to get to the next cool action bit or the next cool character bit. That's how these movies flow.
And it also focuses more on MI6, someone as an organization, because you have a team of people back there doing
Yes.
work that they're feeding Bond, which is essential. The general discovers that Natalia is still alive and gets railed by the defense ministry. Our first Q scene, fucking finally.
Yeah.
We get some banter between the two. Traveling into St. Petersburg, Bond contacts the CIA asset, Jack Wade, one of the villains from The Living Daylights, who advises him to meet the former KGB agent turned gangster, Valentine, and have him arrange a meeting with Janice. Escorted to the meeting by Anna Top, Bond discovers that Janice is, in fact, 006, who had faked his death he learns that 006 is seeking vengeance for his parents, who were Cossacks, who were betrayed by the British by being repatriated to the Soviet Union after collaborating with Axis powers during World War II. And we also get a very clunky Bond exposition dump about James being lucky that his parents died in a climbing accident.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. So okay. Um, I'm going to say something now, knowing that I'm gonna have to eat these words later because I know how this season's gonna flow. Um, I have always been of the opinion that Bond having backstory makes Bond less interesting.
Mm.
And now having rewatched these movies, at this point in James Bond, I stand by that. Because it's become almost a running joke. Like, this is the first movie since Her Majesty's Secret Service where James Bond's wife has not been referenced, actually. So but they replace it with your parents died in a climbing accident. It's like, who cares? Who cares about James Bond's parents, right? Nobody does. Um, but what it is we're actually seeing the starts of trying to build Bond towards being something like an actual character that should actually work in movies, not just an archetype that someone fills to go through cool action scenes. They're trying to actually make a character out of him. It's just such a throwaway line that does nothing in this movie. Like, the movie could work just fine with that line and nothing changes. So it's like, why is this here? And in 1995, watching this, I would have been like, who fucking cares?
While I made the joke and made it seem very clunky, I 70% agree with you. The other 30% of me is they're still trying to parallel 006 and 007. Because,
Agreed.
like, Alec is doing all this because of how the British government did to, like, his parents and everything else, which I think is leftover bits from the original idea of who the character was, versus Bond, whose parents were always loyal to England or whatever else, and yada, yada, yada. So I can see what they were doing, but how they did it, though, that's ugh.
Right, right. But again, like, I know this gets picked up in the reboot and done a lot more with. So it's like, I'm mad at a thing that I know is going to do really good stuff later. So it's like, so I'm trying to think in the moments. It's very much like an attempt to manufacture sympathy with Trevelyan, and it's like, dude, he's the bad guy. I don't want to be sympathetic to him, but again, they're trying to find slightly new ways to predict formula. And for my frustrations with it, ultimately the intent works, right? 006 is Bond's evil parallel. Here's someone who was very loyal to his country. His country betrayed him, and now he's seeking revenge. Bond is very loyal to his country. His country has not yet betrayed him, as far as he knows. But even Bond, in the earlier chunk of this bit, is like, yeah, no, we fucked the Cossacks over, not England's finest hour. He recognizes that England is a flawed country and recognizes that sometimes he will make mistakes. So there's some interesting meat here that's, as far as I can tell, the Brosnan chunk of the franchise will do nothing with in future movies, but we will see again in the future.
All right, I think I made this obvious at the top, but this is Brosnan's best Bond movie out of the 4 that he gets.
That is what
And
I hear
it's
regularly, yeah.
and it's because the writing in the other movies gets progressively worse. It's not Brosnan, it's the writing that fails him. Kind of how the writing failed Jodie Whittaker in Doctor Who,
Yep,
or
or Peter
Shudigawa
Davidson.
in Doctor Who.
Yeah. Yeah. No, certainly this is peak, um, a good actor got bad writing era of James Bond, which, I mean, arguably Dalton also did it, but I think we also argued that Dalton wasn't quite the right person for the role at that time.
I Stand By in Living Daylights is a decent movie.
Right.
And the
But
writing was all right.
but so again, we're in this
20
kind
minutes
of
too long.
we're in this weird era where, like, we I think it can't be overstated. Moore was in the role for a long time, not the longest retroactively, because Daniel Craig now has that honor, but he was in the role for over a decade. And so when you get into a whole production team is like, next one, next one. We talked about this during Moonraker. Like they're already making the next movie. Um, they were making Moonraker during From Russia with Love, and then had to pivot. But like they're
Mm.
very much
You said
the
From Russia
production.
with Love.
Uh, uh, whatever. The movie that was before
Triple X.
Moonraker, right?
Going to
I thought
Triple
someone.
X.
Oh no, that was Spy Who Loved Me. Spy Who Loved Me. Whatever.
Spy
They
Who
all
Loved
blur
Me.
together after a minute. The other one where a spy falls in love with him, as opposed to the other one where a spy falls in love with him. I'm sorry, I got those two confused. How could I possibly make that mistake? But yes, so they were working on the next Moore movie when they were making the previous Moore movie because they had to make them every 18 months. So in a way, having someone like Broccoli step aside is probably good because they were very much like you make Bond movies this way, this way, this way, this way. So when you're forced to reinvent that, Living Daylights, Goldeneye, Casino Royale, those tend to be the strongest of the runs because they're forced to be creative because they can't just make movies the way they did before. But then they start to make bad decisions. Like, okay, well, this is now we can start going into a flow again, so we can just kind of coast, and you can kind of see the movie franchise coasting after that.
Yeah. Something I forgot from the previous beat is that when the base is destroyed, we actually get to experience the horror that Natalia goes through as she's trying to get out of the base. Like that's something that we don't really see a lot in the Bond franchise. We get
Yeah,
touches of it or like quick instances, but like they have you live in the horror for that character to build up sort of sympathy for her and make her a larger piece of the film because right now she's not met Bond yet. So
right.
why would we care about a character who hasn't met Bond in the Bond franchise? So we need to experience her journey to get to Bond.
And as a result, actually, I'm glad about that because leading this chunk, that works for Natalia. Because again, if you're used to Bond movies for certain ways, like why are we spending so much time with this broad, right? Um, it helps again because Boris is so over the top. He helps to carry you through those scenes. But then when Natalia is cold to Bond, it makes sense, right? It's not just I have to resist to your charms, so I inevitably follow your charms because that's how Bond's girls work. It's no, she's doing this because she just had a horrible experience. Give her a goddamn minute, James. You
Yeah.
know, which again, Bond has not changed at all, but because the movie is structured differently, Bond's sexism now becomes a flaw. Because Bond's doing exactly the same shit Bond has always done. Again, minus Dalton. He's straight up Connery at this point. It's exactly what Connery would do in this moment. But because we've seen Natalia, we're like, no, wait, no, buddy, no, don't do that.
And it also has beats of Dalton in this because Dalton's Bond was they essentially tried to make Dalton's Bond more of a one woman per film sort of stick is what they went
Right,
to.
right,
And in a sense, they're taking a part of that with Natalia by making her into full character, becomes a love interest in the movie. But here they also lean back into like the Connerys and Moores by having Bond sleep with other random people, obviously beforehand. Like one, I think in the License to Kill, it was implied that Dalton may have when he landed on a boat. Or am I thinking different? I'm thinking the other one. And in Living Daylights is implied maybe Dalton did when he landed on a boat and then went to a black scene. But this is like Pierce is obviously sleeping with this person, that person, and so it's there. So they're taking the best of both and combining it into one movie.
right. And it really helps that the actor playing Natalia is fantastic.
Yes.
She's really got the right energy. She's not too meek. She's got the right amount of badass, but she's got some sensitivity there. And again, by making Boris her Bond villain functionally, it does something kind of similar to what we saw in License to Kill, where the female counterpart to Bond has her own little arc and villain to defeat. So Boris is Natalia's villain to defeat, and she goes through the exact same problem. Someone she's friends with betrays her, and she has to fight against them, and ultimately, may have to kill them. That's exactly what Bond's going through, and so again, now you also see why these two are drawn together, partially because of Bond's magical penis, but partially because they're going through the same emotional problems. They've had the same betrayal. And so it feels much more natural. And of course, it helps that these two actors have fantastic chemistry.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, there's a lot firing on all cylinders for this chunk of the movie. And then
We
there's Minnie
get
Driver.
to, I I was gonna come to her eventually, but since you're there, yeah. And I didn't even know she was in the film. I was watching it. It's like, wait a second, is that Minnie Driver? I think that's
Yeah.
her. And I actually went and I looked. It is her. I didn't know she was in a
Yeah.
Bond film.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a surprise to me, too. I had the exact same reaction. I was like, I can't be Minnie Driver. Looking up, holy shit, that's Minnie Driver.
And
Playing
it's
a
fucking
terrible
awesome.
Russian singer. Oh, my God.
It is awesome. And so now I'm trying to think where this is in relation to, like, for instance, Gross Point Blank.
I mean, in terms of her career or in terms of continuity? Because I was laughing
In
because
terms of her
continuity.
career, I assume it is not the same character of Gross Point Blank
Be
for her
hilarious.
career.
I believe Gross Point Blank's like right after this, so it would have been like right before her breakout.
So like a little driver songs. Q scene. We get
Yep.
a Q scene. I love it. This is peak Q is mad scientist.
Yep.
Hands down, loved every minute of it. I love the banter between Bond and Q here, which is like on fire back and forth. Felt like they'd worked together for a long time.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is like we now, because we have an actor who's played the same character across 3 different Bonds, and he's in more or less the same scene. We don't quite get this in the Dalton version, but we get a rough equivalent of it. Um, we can see kind of more clearly how Bond reacts to Q each time, because Dalton's reaction to Q is very much the, "Oh, you're a loyal friends and therefore will help me out when I'm having a rough time," and that's kinda how it gets played. Roger Moore is the exasperating child that constantly breaks all the toys you give him, and he will never learn. Um, and Kier is much more, like you said, he's the experienced hand. He's used to James's bullshit. He's kind of just come to accept it. But what's interesting is that the actor who plays Q doesn't really change his performance at any point in time. It's how he's relating to the actor playing Bond that the nuances come out, right? So while this scene and the Moore scenes are all of equivalent comedy, and you're right, this is peak Q going, I make this crazy thing because it was awesome. um, uh, which is sadly missing from License to Kill. At the same time, like I said, you could see Pierce Brosnan stretching and pushing his performance to match that energy, and so he's doing the kind of eye rolling, yes, Q, whatever you say, vibe to it. But clearly, there's a level of affection there that is much more exact. In the Moore era, the gag is that they don't quite get along because Bond is gonna inevitably break the thing that Q made, and Q is mad about that. This one is that's still there, but it feels much more affectionate, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of that is because of how Brosnan's pitching his reactions to help kinda sell that performance a bit more.
Which the more we talk about it, the more in our new theory about how the Bond films line up with the Dalton films, I feel that this is a cue that went to
Yeah.
Bond when he was at hotel in License to Kill to help him out
Mhm.
when he needed it. And they're back at work together as colleagues and
Yep.
they have like that shared bond they had, which is
Yeah,
why it's
yeah,
more friendly antagonism.
yeah. I think you have such talked me out of this being any kind of reboot now because actually the more we talk about it, the more that feels actually really, really valid.
And even like even I think the belt scene where he says it's like geared for your weight and everything else. He's like, what
Mm.
if I need to carry more? It's like it's only good for you because he knows he's going to do something ridiculous with it, but he's letting him know that like it's built for you. It might work.
Right, right.
And we get the BM. I don't know if the BMW is here or not, but he talks about all the great features the BMW has, and then they don't use one single item from it.
So this is a weird bit like one of my favorite tropes is Q gives Bond a weapon, tells him how to use it, and then Bond uses it a completely different way. And that happens later in this movie, so I love that. What I the two tropes I don't like are Bond has a device that was never explained in the movie, which we got a lot of in more. And this is the opposite. where Q spends time explaining stuff that we never get to see. It's like, then why are we talking about cool gadgets we don't get to see? That's the pleasure of a Bond movie, is you tell me we get a gadget and then we see the gadget. That's how these Bond movies work.
I actually know this one because I looked it up because it bothered me, and I think that it was they got the BMW deal so late they didn't have time to change the scripts or anything else.
So they had
But
to talk up the BMW to fulfill the obligation.
yes, but and BMW got like a big, massive. I think it was like one of the most popular cars or whatever for a long time because it was in a
Yeah.
fucking Bond movie, a successful
Right.
Bond movie at that. So it bothers me on as a viewer, but I also then understand from a business standpoint.
Although that reminds me, I forgot to mention this. Going back to the in conversation with Goldfinger argument, way back when Bond was driving around and flirting with two women at once, that was the Aston Martin from Goldfinger. So like that specific car keeps coming back into the franchise.
Oh, look at that! I didn't forget about that. Oh,
I mean, it's the same make and model. It's not the exact same car, but it's the same make and model.
I know, but it's doing a lot. It's doing a lot of stuff. So it's like
Yeah.
classic Bond, classic Bond, classic Bond, something else, classic Bond, something else. Since there was a lot of beats covered here, I'm trying to make sure that we have
Yeah.
everything before we move on. Jack Wade. This guy, Eddie. This guy.
I love Jack Wade.
I
don't know why.
Things like Joe Don Baker, I think is his
Joe
name
Don
or
Baker,
something.
yep, who sadly passed away recently.
Sorry to hear that. He was one of the two villains in The Living Daylights.
He was.
And
He was
they
the
recycled
American
him to come
general.
back here. I can't remember whether or not, I think he might have married into the Broccoli family. I think I read somewhere, heard a rumor. I'm like 20-80 on that, like 20% certain to 80% uncertain. But we don't need this guy. I want Felix back.
I'm glad it's not Felix, right? Because one of the reasons why I actually like Jack Wade is Felix Leiter, at this point in the Bond franchise, is Bond's American friend who we share a job with, but he's just not quite as good as Bond at anything. And so he likes Leiter because Leiter's fun and gets what my job does, but also doesn't make me look bad. Jack Wade has no clue how to be a spy. He is the most America character we have seen in the franchise to date, barring the redneck character from the Moore era that we skipped over, thankfully. But like this guy is like, I don't even know how spying works. I'm just gonna throw Marines at the problem until it stops.
See, my issue is it's like Felix and that Dukes of Hazzard sheriff had a love child, and it is Jack Wade. And so
right.
it's two in the middle. I want one side or the other for this character.
But see, I kind of love it because Jack Wade is a character who is explicitly in a Bond film who does not know how Bond film works and is not inclined to learn. Right? He's like, I don't know, some guy named Teasy, I don't remember his name. It's like, there's only 26 letters in the alphabet. You've gone through two of them. You can't remember one fucking letter. It's like, I can't be bothered. I can't be ours. It's British stuff. I don't care. I mean, he's like, I'm in a Bond film and just absolutely refuse to acknowledge the formula that exists. And I kind of love that. It's just the like, there's a catchphrase. I didn't want to do the catchphrases are stupid. Like, do the fucking catchphrase. You're a spy. That's how this works. I do the catchphrase. No, I'm gonna put a gun on you so you tell me the goddamn catchphrase because this is a Bond movie. Please, God, do the thing so we can move on in the film. It's it's probably not intentional, but it feels like people are going, we really love Bond films and we kind of want to play with it a little bit. We don't want to deconstruct it. We don't want to point out the flaws in it like we were kind of doing in License to Kill. But we do recognize some of this stuff is silly. So let's have a character kind of like, this is silly, right? This is kind of dumb.
All right, you've turned me around on Jack Wade. You've done that successfully. Okay, I got it. I'm on board with Jack Wade now. But
Jack Wade's great.
And then we get another exposition dump from like the KGB turned mobster guy that lets us know what a Cossack is because we're stupid Americans who don't know history. It's like, this is who they are. This is what they've done. So you understand before the next movie beat hits. Like, thank you.
Right. The only part of that scene is good is Bond's refusing to accepting, yes, my government messed up. easy for him to do because that was 50 years prior. So it's not like it's a huge concession on his part. But it is interesting because it would have been if this was a novel Bond, right? If this is like from one of the Ian Fleming novels, Bond would have been active during that time or just been recruited, right? So it would have been very
Yeah.
contemporaneous for him. So it is an interesting nod towards the character of Bond mildly refuting some elements of Ian Fleming's Bond in terms of setting, right? It's not quite rejecting the original character, but it's like the yeah, some bad shit happened in World War II that maybe we weren't proud of. Whereas novel Bond is very much, you know, we are one of the main reasons why the Nazis were defeated. You know, so I mean, it's interesting to see that kind of complexity. But otherwise, you're absolutely right. It is so info dumpy.
Yeah. And we get the fight scene between Bond and Onatop in the steam room.
Karate chop.
And you get Bond getting to quip about safe sex. Bond, of all people, getting to quip about safe sex.
Okay, so two things about that scene. One, I am surprised taking this long for the Bond sex scene, the Bond fight scene to be the same scene. It is surprising taking this long in the franchise for that to happen. But peak Brosnan Bonds for me, short of The Next Girl, but the best line that I love is him pointing a gun at a woman and going, "No, no, no." The pure balance of toying with her, but I will fucking kill you is amazing. He's like, I'm having fun too, but seriously, I will shoot you.
Oh, it is so awesome. That is why it all works so well.
Yeah.
Bond is sedated and trapped in the stolen tiger alongside Natalia, a survivor of the initial attack. After escaping the helicopter's destruction, the pair are taken to custody and interrogated by the Russian Prime Minister of Defense. Natalia affirms that the general is involved in the Goldeneye theft and that there's two of them, and that fellow programmer Boris survived alongside her, who is now working for Janus and operating the second Goldeneye satellite. Um, the general comes in, disheveled, possibly drunk, kills the defense minister, and manages to capture Natalia, commandeering a T-55 tank. The best fucking scene in the whole movie. I don't care. Bond pursues the general to a missile train used by Janus. He kills the general and escapes the train with Natalia, who hacks the hacker before it explodes. There's so much goodness here, Eddie.
All
It
right.
is a long beat of the movie, but there's so little plot progression. I still love it.
No, you're totally. I do want to get to the thanks scene, but before we do, let's have our dinner before we go to dessert. I really liked having the lengthy look at Russian politics here.
Yeah.
Because again, it would have been so easy for a post Cold War Bond to go, let's just not touch on this stuff. Instead, they dive right. It's like, no, Russia's in upheaval. In '95, is going to be that weird blend of these guys were in charge 4 years ago. So some of those institutions still be around, while also Russia trying to strike out its new identity as a democracy, although now that is alleged democracy. Thank
For
you.
a lot of places.
But right. So, but you know, they're trying to find a democratic path forward while still having these communist leftovers, and so you have stuff like a guy who would have been a KGB senior exec or a senior person 5 years ago is now suddenly a criminal, and the while also trying to grab a hold of the burgeoning um, computer age, because like again, the idea of a Russian hacker is not really a trope yet. You know that's now it's a well known thing, but this would have been very novel. It's like the idea that they're into computers and doing computer stuff. This is all really fascinating. So you have Natalia and Boris on one ends of the spectrum, and Mishkin and Grushenko at the other end. Not Grushenko, the general at the other end, Umarov. So you have the old KGB guard and the new, younger computer era, and they're all separately have their own quadrants of approach. The minister gets killed pretty fast in this scene, but for a moment, you have four Russian characters all coming from very different perspectives with relatively complex interiority for a Bond film, and Bond's barely a presence in this scene, right? It's and you need this scene. There's no way you can't cut the scene out. This scene is necessary to understand what happens in the check on movies. So like you can't not have this scene, but it's a really important look into what would have been just the Iron Curtain.
I think part of that sensitivity, though, comes from the fact that they got to film in the Soviet Union and everywhere else. Much
Oh,
how
okay.
for like License to Kill, they got to go and they filmed in Mexico and everywhere else, and there was suddenly a sensitivity to the people that live there.
Mhm.
I think if you get to film in their location, there's an added level of sensitivity that they'll add to it. Possibly it was in contracts. Possibly they were actually trying to be more progressive and move forward by doing these things.
It's funny now that you say that. I remember thinking that in the movie, but it fell out of my head, and I'm glad you reminded me. There is similar in the sense that there's a lot of Russian thrown around that is untranslated, but you get from context what's being said. That was very similar to how Spanish was thrown around in
Mhm.
License to Kill. So yeah, there's definitely one connectivity between the two. Is like, yeah, if we could film there and we get access to people who live there and maybe even actors who work there, there's going to be some more inclusivity that comes along with that. And so it's not presenting Russia in a positive light, but it's presenting Russia in a much more nuanced light than they ever shown Russia in any previous Bond movie.
And to that extent, it was interesting to see how the defense minister interacts with Bond himself, because he doesn't necessarily he doesn't necessarily want to kill him. He wants information, but says, "Hey,
Right.
you're a British spy. You're here. There's a destroyed helicopter. You could be dead. So tell me what I need to know, and maybe we can discuss it." And
Right.
that's
Which
where I pulled
again,
my quote from, because it's not an interrogation. It's just like,
yeah.
what is it?
And again, I kind of love that because, like, the way the guy plays the defense minister, he's just exhausted. He's not the evil Russian dictator. He's just like, buddy, listen, I've got you banged to rights. I don't want to go through the paperwork of executing you. Just tell me what I'm fucking know, right? That's very much the vibe of this whole scene. And then of course the other general comes in. The guy's like, listen, this guy's saying that you're doing this stuff. It's like, really? What? No, that's not me. And it's like, well, I wasn't suspicious, but I am now. It's like, ah, fuck, blam, blam, you're dead.
But see, that's just it. I think from the original scene, he was already suspicious of the general, because the general came in and says, I'm quitting because this has happened. And he says, what about the other survivor in the earlier scenes? And he goes, oh, yeah, well, then I'm not quitting. So automatically that has the defense minister's hackles up, which I think is why he was the first person on the scene to interrogate Bond. Well, talk to Bond and Natalia. And
Oh, okay, no, that's fair.
the only reason the entire situation is diffused, that he gets any information, is because Natalia diffused the situation with Bond and him from like cockfighting. It's like, no, mine's bigger than yours. Yours is bigger than mine. Mine's bigger than yours.
Okay, no,
And
yeah,
Natalia
that's a
goes,
good point.
chill, motherfuckers. This is what really happened.
Right, no, that's fair because then you're right, because Michigan, the reason, from your interpretation, which is I think actually more valid, is that the reason why Michigan isn't bothering to interrogate Bond or kill Bond is because, like, listen, you have piece of information I need to confirm my suspicions.
Correct.
Right, that's fair. But I think we're both in agreement that his suspicions do increase during the course of that scene.
Yes.
You could see because
He's getting confirmation.
I still feel like at least when he first has Bond in hand, it's still a bit of like, I don't think this is true, but let me go through the motions. There still feels like a bit perfunctory. And then when Umarov comes in, he definitely visibly becomes more like, now wait a minute, right? Um, but again, there's that's a level of political complexity that is not usually present in a Bond film.
Because you mentioned the hassle of paperwork you'd have to go through for Bond. Think about the hassle of paperwork he'll have to go through to get rid of the general if the general's really the person that did this. So I'm not
Right.
seeing it so much as that he doesn't believe the general did it. He doesn't believe Bond. He's thinking about, shit, if that's true, there are all these other things I need to do. It is easier if you're at fault.
Sure, right. And the other thing that in the scene we get is that um, we have a corrupt Russian general, which is a pretty common trope. But Michigan is the opposite, which is that someone who's actually still, again, another character who's relatively loyal to his country. He's like, he he's maybe exhausted by the whole thing, but he is trying to do due diligence in this investigation. He's like, I have this thing in front of me. I've got to look into it. It's frustrating. I don't want to do it, but this programmer's saying this. I've got to look into it. I don't want to investigate this general, but I have to. And then the general comes in, gives him even more reason to be suspicious. Okay, well now I'm really suspicious, and then that gets cut short very, very forcefully. But um, there's a to have that, and I bring all that up because simultaneously you have a complex relationship between Bond and M's relationship with other parts of MI6, showing that both the UK and Russia are having internal conflicts, and things are not nearly as clear as they were during the Cold War, i.e., previous Bond films. So therefore, like frankly, previous Bond films were some form of M going, like we said, you're fired, except for not really, or I'm almost going to fire you if you do this again. Now there's layers and complexity, and worrying about how this looks to people, um, and throw Trevelyan in there, who's playing both sides, right? He was a British agent, but is secretly a Russian citizen, and is now trying to use both sides against each other. There's a lot of complex political maneuvering that, given all of that, the fact that we have only one really info dummy scene is actually pretty good.
Yeah. And we get the chase scene that goes throughout as they sort of escape. They capture Natalia. We get the use of the belt, the Q gadget, finally.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All leading up to the best scene, and the first time we break out the James Bond music in this movie.
I had noticed that actually. Yeah. That's a good thing, because let's be honest, the tank scene is the most James Bondian scene in the whole movie, right? Of all the scenes, this is the one that's like, yes, we're in a goddamn James Bond movie right now. So bringing up the Bond movie at that moment is good because like this is like, yeah, we're doing a lot of changes. We're shifting some things. It's still very James Bond. We're making some strong changes to the franchise. Then you get to hear it's like, okay, but no, seriously, it's still a James Bond movie, and we know what you're here for. You're here for the big over the top action scenes, so we're still going to give you that. So by playing the move music here, now that you say that, I could see that as a statement of we still know what the core values are. We're not gonna stray from those. And it's true because this scene is amazingly ludicrous.
So I noticed it when I was watching it, but then I went back and looked into it a little bit because I don't like most of the score. And it looks like they went in later and they had to remove the musical pieces that the person they got to score the movie, I think is the same guy that did the score for like The Professional and some other stuff. They had to remove his musical choices and put in the Bond theme here, which without it, it would have been a good scene, but this makes it a fucking dynamically amazing scene with the Bond music there.
Yeah. And let's be honest, we haven't talked about this, but like particularly Moore era, the Bond theme gets a bit overused, actually. It's kind of like it's like 2 or 3 times during the movie. It's like, so scaling it back makes sense. So let's pick an iconic moment and put it there, and this is definitely that.
Well, I think they were trying to use it more for the Moore films because they didn't feel Bondy enough, so they kept trying, if we give you the music, it becomes Bond. But like this,
less is more. Definitely, that's a good point. And again, this is a similar trick that we played later. But just the scene itself, like the way I keep talking about Pierce Brosnan's great, but he is. The way he nonchalantly drives a tank wearing a tuxedo through Moscow, plowing through buildings, is perfect. Like at one point in time, he just ducks his head and then plows through a building and pops back up again, like nothing's gone wrong. Like he just went over a branch or something. It's like a building just got demolished, man.
So one of the things that I'm really loving about this is Pierce Brosnan's Bond is a professional. Up to this whole point, he'll kill people if he needs to, but he doesn't necessarily take joy in it. How I've seen some other Bonds do, like Connery's Bond would just like kill you, motherfucker.
Oh yeah,
Roger Moore made a joke of it. Timothy Dalton was like vengeance. Brosnan is like part of my job, so I guess I'll do it. And there's no question. Professional, done, moves on. Professional, done, moves on. And there's something to that competency porn almost is what it is. To see him constantly do it and go through, and then we get bits of who he really is when he's not doing those action scenes like that.
That's a good point, because more is always that, right? Um, it's so bonkers that he's always just that exaggerated character. And Dalton was never really the exaggerated character. As soon as you said that, that clicked into place for me. Pierce Brosnan is both. When he's on the job, he is a tool, he's a weapon. And he makes the jokes because that is a way to diffuse tension, which is not an indication you ever got during Moore. You get a little bit in Connery, but you never get that during Moore. Moore, he's just a psycho. Um, Whereas you're right, we do see him in softer moments in this movie, like with Natalia. Um, Side note, I do want to mention, I mentioned before and after because it pays off later, but we before. Um, Natalia does ask at one point in time because Di's captured and Bond says, "Go ahead and shoot her. She doesn't mean nothing to me." Which, in the moment, is like you're saying, that professional thing. He's not angry about it. He's not clinical about it. He's just, this is, I can't let you killing her stop my mission. And so afterwards, she questions him, and it's like, would you have let him kill me? And he goes, yes. And then it's a big joke. Ha ha ha. The fact that then they have the reverse of that a bit later in the movie. I know we're jumping ahead a bit, but I want fact
Yeah.
and what's, because Bond is at gunpoint and she goes, "Kill him, he does nothing to me." And you cut to Brosnan. All he does, he kind of gives a nod to the head of like, "I deserve that." Is perfect. It's silent acting, but just his look is kind of like shake of his head of like, "Yeah, no, that's fair." Is wonderful. It tells you so much about their relationship and about this Bond specifically. Because again, to your point, I bring it up because he is a professional. And he's like, "No, yeah, that's the right call, right?" You know, and that's something that never quite comes across in other previous Bonds. The fact that he can be off the clock.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm gonna move ahead a little bit since I think
Yeah,
we're probably close to our normal time already.
yeah,
Uh, Bond and Natalia travel to Cuba after Boris is tracked to a location within the island's jungles. While flying over the area, the pair are shot down. On a top is lowered from a helicopter and attacks him, but Bond destroys the helicopter and kills her. The pair uncover a hidden base beneath a large lake, concealing a satellite dish. Bond is captured while trying to rig the base to explode and learns from 006 that he intends to steal money from the Bank of England and use Goldeneye to erase his financial records and conceal the theft. Bond calls him a simple bank robber. Bond surmises that 006 intends for the electromagnetic pulse to trigger a global financial meltdown and social collapse, causing the United Kingdom to re-enter the Stone Age.
I actually don't have much to say because I think we've covered it in other chunks.
I, I want this to be a separate beat simply because of on a top coming out of that fucking helicopter, and they almost break a trope where you don't have a male character fight a female character. Part of what
Yeah,
they did though is to have Bond be dazed from the helicopter being shot down, so that doesn't make you question Bond's capability of combat.
right,
They have Natalia try to help, but Natalia is a hacker and not a fighter, so she's easily
right.
dispatched, but she tries. And in the end, Bond is able to beat on a top because he outsmarted her. So the helicopter kills her, which means Bond doesn't have to physically fight her. But if you go back and look at Bond's history, when Bond is fighting henchmen, Bond can never generally beat the henchmen in a one-on-one fight. He has to outsmart them, and that follows the same Bondian trope here with her, making her the equivalent of Odd Job, Jaws, and every other motherfucker that came before.
That's such a good point, and also does remind me. There's one of the things I do want to say is that in License to Kill, I remarked that the Bond franchise trying to figure out what to do with his inevitable female equivalent in the movie, and the answer is to basically make her kind of like Bond. And I pointed out that was mild and satisfying. I like how Natalia's handled better because she can handle a gun. We see later that she's comfortable with firearms, but she's not a secret agent. And so it doesn't feel dismissive when Anatapa just brushes her aside. It's like, of course, she can't do anything about that. Um, it doesn't lessen her character in a way, but it felt like the DEA agent in License to Kill could do everything a Bond could do, right? But then inevitably is not quite as good as Bond's. Natalia's like, no, she has different skill sets, and she therefore it plays better when that happens. And goes to your point, yeah, like Natalia can't deal with it. Bond can't deal with it. Bond's got to just be smarter than on top, and he is because so by using the tropes in different ways, but still clinging to them, shows that the Bond formula does work in '95.
Yes. But you have to think through it and do all that extra work,
Right.
which comes from having time to write it and consider it instead of do 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 do.
Yep. Exactly.
So there's something to be said for making a franchise reliable for every 2 years versus, though, at the same time, something to be said for being able to sit down and plot it out to make it more impactful for when you do have your movie.
Agreed.
Natalia hacks into the satellite and reprograms it to initiate atmospheric reentry and thus destroy itself. She is then
Sure.
captured as well. While trying to undo her programming, Boris nervously presses on a pin confiscated from Bond. Activating a grenade concealed in the pin by Q branch, Bond knocks the pin from Boris's hand and into a puddle of chemicals that were spilled during an earlier gunfight, causing a chemical explosion that allows Bond and Natalia to escape. To prevent Boris from regaining control of the satellite, Bond sabotages the disarray by jamming its gears. 006 tries to intercept him, and an ensuing fistfight, like old school fistfight, between the two, climax in 006 being dangled from the antenna. He says, "For England, Bond." Bond says, "For me," and drops him onto the dish. The GoldenEye satellite is destroyed. Natalia soon rescues Bond in a commandeered helicopter, showing off her gun skills. Moment before the antenna malfunctions and explodes, destroying the base and killing 006 for a third time in this movie.
Yes.
The debris falls, crushing him to death. Boris dies from an explosion caused by the ruptured liquid nitrogen canisters, one of the best Bond deaths in the franchise. After
Hmm.
landing in a meadow, Bond and Natalia prepare to enjoy some much needed extra curricular activities, but are interrupted by fucking Wade and an entire team of U.S. Marines who Bond and Natalia were about to do it on top of, who then escort them to Guantanamo Bay Naval Base.
That last line, I was just like, oh, movie's doing so good. And that last line was like, that aged so badly.
Yeah.
Do I
Yeah.
go to Guantanamo? No, no, I do not.
Eddie, this entire film is resolved by a pin. As a writer, I love that.
Well, and I love the fact again. That's my favorite trope is a Bond gadget done in a way that you don't expect it to. Um, and I love it because the tension of like because very beginning cute, it's like click it 3 times, activate, click 3 times to deactivate it, and it's just a okay. Of course, there's a weird way of doing it. That's how these things work. And then the actual tension of watching a guy spinning a pen and clicking it, and then cutting to Brosnan looking like visibly trying to keep track of how many times it's clicking his head. You
it
know, that should not be as suspenseful it is, but it really, really is.
is so awesome. I love it. Oh, and
And we see
this is,
said
I
Spike
think,
again. I'll
this
spike
is
her.
also
I'll spike her. She
the
can't stop me.
see,
I am invincible.
and we get the fact that Natalia is in fact very good at her job. The entire time we've had Boris sort of like insulting her and her programming skills. And given if Boris had enough time, he could probably figure out how to undo it. But the fact that she thwarts him in doing this and he can't beat
Right.
it, and he's so frustrated because he's under pressure that he snaps.
Mhm.
Oh, good character work.
Right, because it's almost to the line of um, if you're a white man, don't have to deal with abuse on a regular basis. You're more fragile to that stuff. It's not quite crossing that, but it's very close to that
Yeah.
thing, right? So yeah, I really dug that, and also I just really you mentioned Boris's death is one of the best ones, and it's great because both Trevelyan and Boris are are killed and then miraculously survive only to be killed again, which is a very much a Bond's trope. But again, to your point, like it would be early on, you would think of it like Trevelyan is the Bond villain and Boris is the henchman, but it's not. You're right. On top absolutely is 1000% the Bond villain henchman. So Boris and Trevelyan are both separately different Bond villains. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's fascinating because 006 is the more grounded License to Kill era, very violent, very scary Bond villain. And Boris is very much a Dr. No, over the top, ludicrous Bond villain, but they're both actually Bond villains. They're two separate Bond villains in this movie.
And that is a callback to the In Living Daylights. It has two specific Bond villains in it.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. You're right. Yeah, it has the American General and the other guy.
Yeah. So right there, you get those parallels. They were not that far away from what Dalton was doing. They perfected some of the Dalton formula, and they had an actor that could pull it off, which is why it works. You need all of those things to have something to be as successful as this. Like, this movie blew the charts off. It made, without the success of this movie, there would be no more Bond.
Yeah. I wasn't sure about that, but I suspected that. So final thoughts. As it may have been clear, I generally agree with you. I very much enjoyed watching this movie. And in a way, I was sad because I've heard anecdotally that the Brosnan films get worse after this. It's like, oh, that sucks because this is such a good movie. But I also agree with something we kind of settled on, which is that the Dalton movies needed to find their footing so that this movie could do well. We can't keep making movies like Roger Moore movies. We don't know. So we had two different attempts, and Living Daylights and License to Kill. We joke about blurring together, but they are very different films. They're two kind of different takes on what Bond could be, and Goldeneye is a synthesis. But it needed someone like Brosnan who can flow between those extremes and make each scene feel connected. Because if you think about it, scenes in isolation, this movie should make no fucking sense, right? At some points, it is almost Tom Clancy levels of techno thriller grittiness, and then you have people dying from, cryogenic or formula or whatever. You have, on the one hand, super serious post-Soviet hacker trying to reconcile her country's trajectory with a woman who kills people by crushing their chest with her thighs. I mean, none of this should hang together, and it does because of Brosnan. It absolutely is because of Brosnan.
This movie went through a jillion rewrites to be as good as it is, because they knew everything was banking on this, and it worked. I'm amazed, and it's just not Brosnan. I've given a bunch of kudos to Brosnan, but it is every single lead actor in this movie is bringing like their A game.
Fair, absolutely fair.
If one of them had not brought that, the movie would not work. And I know I've listened to some other people in the past, like one of my favorite podcasts covered this movie like a decade ago, I think. And they talked about how they didn't like Natalia, and because she doesn't do anything. And Natalia is critical to the movie, and her energy pairs with Bond's energy. And Natalia humanizes Bond in those moments where he's not on the job. And it's a great parallel for her having to deal with Boris, who's over the top, and for Bond, who has to deal with Onatop, who's over the top. I can't stress enough that everyone cannot be an 11. Your movie does not work if everyone's an 11.
Yeah, no. And I mean, one thing we glossed over a small chunk of the movie where Natalia and Bond actually have a romance, right? This is one of the few times where Bond has an actual love interest, not just a conquest. It's not just the woman he wins at the end of the movie. This is someone that falls in love with him, and he falls a bit for as well. And the movie spends a little bit of time, not much, granted, a little bit of time of like showing that relationship evolve and change. And so yeah, she does nothing in this movie. Fuck you, but she's one of the most important parts of this movie, I would argue.
And
so yeah, it's great.
One of the things the Bond movies did try to do, at least early on, is, which you had some issues with, is like giving him a history and stuff, but it humanizes the character of Bond while at the same time not removing that over the top super spy stuff. And part of it, when I look at this now, it makes me think about the Punisher, how Frank could turn on Punisher well, he get turn on human and then go back to being Punisher.
Right.
And Bond here turns on Bond, then goes back to being James.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, like I said at the time, like the backstory thing when I was a Bond fan at the time, I was like, you don't need this shit. Fuck you. Over the years, I've changed my opinion on that because, frankly, with very rare exception, even Doctor Who is changing this. You can't have a character who's just an icon. There has to be some human element to it. And so you're right. This does a long way towards finishing the humanizing component that Dalton started.
And my final thoughts on the entire movie: this is in my top five Bond movies. I don't know where it is, and even if I do, I wouldn't tell you until we get to the end of the run. But it's in my
Right.
top five.
I think I would agree with that. Speaking of movies and movies in your top five, we will next be talking about Casino Royale, the first Daniel Craig movie, which is also in my top five Bond movies.
Not the Woody Allen one from the '60s. We're not going to jump all the
No,
way back.
dear God, no. You keep threatening that, and I keep resisting because I'm
It's
not
got
going to watch
David
that movie.
Niven, Eddie.
That is not a point in its favor. Yes, so that is the 2006 Casino Royale movie, which does explicitly canonically reboot the franchise.
Not necessarily in the movie, but we'll talk about that at the same time.
Well, yeah,
Talk
we'll
about
get to
next
that.
time.
If people wanted to talk to you about Pierce Brosnan and the other Pierce Brosnan movies, where do they find you online?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Darker Hue. You come into the Discord and talk to me. If you want to support me, you could join my Patreon, where I'm still trying to generate Haunted West pre-gens for all the balladeers running the game at Gamehole Con in October, I think is when Gamehole Con is. What about
Yeah,
you?
we can get going. You can find me at pugsteady.com. That is my website. That's where you can find me on Blue Sky. Uh, I think I'll have just finished up a crowdfunder. So we'll see how I am at the end of that. It's funded already, so I'm not worried about that. It's just the usual stress of running a crowdfunder is always fun. Um, but if you want to support other stuff I do, definitely check out realmsofpugmare.com. That is my creator-owned material of a fantasy game about dogs and cats and other stuff. And with that, we will see you next time with Casino Royale.
Be seeing you.